Okay, so you want to own a medieval watermill. At first, it looks like one of the cleanest businesses in the village. You are not planting wheat. You are not waiting for harvest weather. You are not walking behind an ox in a muddy field. You are not selling bread one loaf at a time in a crowded market. You own the machine that stands between grain and bread. That is the fantasy. A stream runs through the valley. A wooden wheel turns. Inside the mill, heavy stones grind grain into flour. Farmers arrive with sacks. They need you because grain is not very useful until it is milled. You take your toll, they leave with meal. Tomorrow, more farmers arrive. The surface math feels almost unfair. Everybody eats bread. Everybody grows grain. Everybody needs milling. So if you control the mill, you control the narrow door between the field and the table. You do not need to convince people they want your product. Hunger does that for you. You do not need fashion. You do not need luxury taste.
You do not need a distant market. You only need the village to keep eating, and medieval villages were very good at that. So the owner fantasy is simple. Build the mill once. Let the water power it. Take a small share from every sack. The river works for free. The peasants bring the grain. The stones turn. The toll piles up. That is the dream. Here is the problem. The river does not work for free. And the mill is not really a flour business. A medieval watermill was a water rights business, a repair business, a local monopoly business, a trust business, and in many places a manorial power business, disguised as a wooden building with a wheel. The visible product was ground grain. The hidden product was control over necessary processing. That is the core reversal. You were not really selling flour. You were selling access to mechanical power, at the exact point where the village had no easy alternative. And that sounds powerful until you read the ledger. Start with why the mill mattered.
For most Hathways, grain had to be processed before it became everyday food. Hand grinding was slow, tiring, and inefficient compared with a powered mill. A watermill could turn energy from a stream into repeated work. Wheel turns, gears move, stones grind, sacks fill, and the same machinery can serve many households. That made the mill one of the most important pieces of infrastructure in a medieval landscape. It was not just a building. It was a machine attached to water, roads, fields, legal rights, and local obligation. Historic England describes medieval watermills as common features of rural and urban landscapes, and important to technology and economy. In many places, mills were associated with status and income for the lord of the manor, who often leased the mill and its land to a miller. That little sentence contains the business model. The miller might operate the mill, but the person who truly owned the best economics was often the person who owned the right.
The right to build there. The right to use the water. The right to compel tenants to bring grain. The right to take a toll. The right to rent the whole machine to someone else and collect payment before the miller knows how good the year will be. That is the first hidden layer. If you are the miller, you may look like the owner from the doorway, but if the mill belongs to a manor, you may be leasing the machine from someone who gets paid first. The landlord owns the river on paper. You own the headaches in practice. Now look at what you need before the first sack arrives. You need a stream with reliable flow. Not a pretty stream, a useful stream. Water must be strong enough to turn the wheel, steady enough to support regular work, and controllable enough that the mill can operate when customers arrive. Too little water and the wheel slows or stops. Too much water and the structure can be damaged.
Floods can tear at banks, threaten the wheel, damage sluices, fill channels with debris, and turn a profitable machine into a repair project overnight. So you need more than water. You need water management. A watermill often depends on a leat or artificial channel that diverts water from the main stream. It may need a millpond to hold water, a dam or weir to raise the level, sluices to control flow, a tail race to carry spent water away, banks to keep everything where it belongs, and access paths for carts bringing sacks. This is the first lesson of the ledger. The wheel is the famous part. The channel is the business. If the water cannot be guided, stored, released, and returned, the wheel is just expensive decoration. Now add construction. A medieval mill is not a shed with a wheel nailed to the side. It needs a building that can hold heavy stones, shafts, gearing, bins, sacks, and workers moving around dust and moving parts. It needs timber strong enough for constant vibration. It needs iron fittings where wood alone will fail. It needs millstones, and millstones are not cheap. Good stones may have to be quarried, shaped, transported, fitted, dressed, and maintained. The stones are the heart of the mill. They also wear down. Every turn that creates revenue also consumes the surface that creates the revenue. That is the strange beauty of this business. The machine earns by damaging itself slowly. The upper stone turns. Grain enters through the center. Meal moves outward. The miller adjusts the gap between the stones depending on how fine the meal should be. Too wide and the customer complains the grain is not properly ground. Too tight and the stones can overheat, wear faster, or produce poor work. The miller is not just watching a machine. He is managing precision in a wooden building powered by changing water. That precision is where reputation lives. Because the customers know something very important. The miller is taking a share.
In many medieval settings, payment for grinding was taken as a portion of the grain or flour. This toll was often known as molter. The exact rate could vary by place and custom. The Yorkshire Historical Dictionary records examples where the toll might be described as a certain vessel out of a larger number, and local rules could be surprisingly detailed. For the customer, this creates immediate suspicion. If you hand over a sack of grain and the miller returns less meal than you expected, how do you know the loss is fair? Some loss comes from the toll, some comes from waste, some comes from dust, some comes from moisture, some comes from the quality of the grain, and some, customers will always suspect, comes from the miller. That is why a mill is a trust business. The customer needs the service. The customer resents the toll. The customer cannot easily inspect every part of the process, and the customer may be legally required to use your mill. That is not a recipe for affection.
It is a recipe for disputes. This brings us to one of the most powerful features of the medieval mill, suit of mill. In many manorial systems, tenants could be required by custom to bring their grain to the lord's mill instead of grinding it elsewhere. The lord's mill then collected the multure, the toll in grain. A recent Cambridge study of country mills describes disputes where manorial mills claimed customary rights to grind grain from local inhabitants, and where people got into conflict by taking grain to other mills, or using private hand or horse mills. That sounds like a wonderful monopoly. And sometimes it was. If the law or custom forces the village to use your mill, you have demand before you open the door. You are not chasing customers. Customers are being sent to you by obligation. But a forced customer is not the same as a happy customer, and a monopoly comes with duties. The same disputes show an important caveat. If the manorial mill was not properly maintained, or if it could not serve customers within the customary time, people could have grounds to use another mill. That is the trap hidden inside the monopoly. The right to customers depends on the ability to serve them. You cannot simply own the obligation and neglect the machine. If the mill breaks, the custom weakens. If the queue is too long, the customer has an argument. If the water fails, the toll stops. If the miller takes too much, resentment becomes legal trouble. So the dream says, the village must come to me. The ledger says, then you must be ready when the village arrives. Now imagine harvest season. This is when the mill feels rich. Carts arrive, sacks pile up, farmers need grain ground, the village wants flour. The mill wheel turns for long hours. The miller takes toll after toll. If you are well positioned, this is the moment that justifies the whole investment. But harvest is also when the mill is under maximum pressure. Too many customers arrive at once. Everyone wants priority. Grain waits in sacks. Weather can change. Roads become muddy. Water levels may be wrong. The millstones need attention exactly when you do not want to stop. A broken gear during a quiet month is annoying. A broken gear during the main rush is expensive in a way that reaches beyond the repair bill. Because delay is not neutral. If a farmer waits too long, he complains. If the manor depends on the toll, the lord complains. If the village cannot get grain processed, the whole food routine tightens. If another mill can serve them faster, they remember. The mill is powerful because it is necessary. But necessity turns service failure into public anger. That is why maintenance is not a background cost. Maintenance is the business. You need the wheel repaired. You need paddles or buckets kept in shape. You need the axle working. You need gears aligned.
You need wooden teeth replaced. You need the stones dressed by cutting or sharpening their working surfaces. You need the sluices cleared. You need the channel free of silt, branches, ice, and debris. You need the dam watched. You need the banks held. The miller who saves too much on maintenance is borrowing from the worst possible lender, the next breakdown. And the next breakdown chooses its own date. Now look at revenue. The obvious revenue is the milling toll, a portion of grain taken for grinding. But the best mill economics could stack revenue in several ways. First, the toll itself. If many households are bound by custom or habit to use the mill, the toll becomes a steady claim on local food production. Second, lease structure. A lord or estate owner might lease the mill to a miller for a fixed rent. The landlord gets predictable income. The miller gets the operating upside, but also the operating risk. Third, byproducts and handling.
The miller may deal in bran, coarse meal, flour quality, storage, carting, weighing, and arrangements with bakers or households. Fourth, timing. During peak demand, a reliable mill can command loyalty. During shortages, the miller who has relationships and a reputation for fair work may be trusted with grain when nobody wants to risk loss. Fifth, location. A mill near a bridge, road, village center, manor, market route, or cluster of farms can earn not only because water turns the wheel, but because customers can reach it without wasting a day. This is another hidden reversal. Water powers the mill. Roads feed the mill. A perfect stream in the wrong place is less valuable than a good stream where carts already pass. The customer does not bring grain by imagination. He brings it by road. That means access matters. The mill needs a yard, a path, a place to unload, and enough space for waiting. In bad weather, access can become a cost. A muddy approach slows carts. A damaged bridge reduces traffic. A steep path discourages customers. If the customer must spend too much effort reaching the mill, he begins to resent the toll before the grain is even weighed. Now consider the operating day. You open before the village thinks you open. Water must be checked. The sluice must be set. The stones must be ready. The floor must be swept enough to work, though it will never truly escape dust. Sacks must be identified. Customers must be handled in order. Grain must be measured. The toll must be taken in a way that looks legitimate. The stones must be adjusted. Meal must be bagged. Arguments must be managed. The miller lives in a world of small accusations. You took too much. You ground it too coarse. You made me wait. You favored his sack over mine. You mixed grain. Your stones spoiled the meal. Your toll dish is too generous to yourself. That is the social cost of running a necessary monopoly. People need you, but they do not have to like needing you. And if they are required to use your mill, they may dislike it even more. This is why the miller often had an ambiguous place in the village imagination. He could be prosperous, skilled, and essential. He could also be suspected, mocked, or watched. The business made him important, but importance in a small community is not the same as comfort. From the outside, owning a mill looks passive. Inside, it is constant management of trust. Now add the landlord. If the mill is leased, the rent comes before profit. The lord or estate wants predictable payment because the mill is an income-producing asset. The miller accepts the lease because the toll can be profitable if traffic is strong, water is reliable, and repairs do not explode. This creates a familiar trap. Fixed rent, variable season. The landlord's claim stays steady. The water does not. The harvest does not. The road does not. The wheel does not. Seasonality is the part of the business that makes the mill feel less like a machine and more like a negotiation with the landscape. In a dry period, the stream may run too low to power the wheel properly. The measing can still exist, the customers can still need flour, and the legal right can still be written clearly, but the water simply refuses to produce enough force. A miller in that situation is not short of demand, he's short of power. In a wet period, the problem reverses. Too much water can damage the works, overflow banks, bring branches and debris into channels, weaken dams, and make access roads miserable. A flood does not have to destroy the mill to hurt the business. It only has to interrupt service during the days when customers are counting on you. Winter adds another kind of cost. Ice can make water control harder. Cold makes repair work slower. Roads can be difficult. Customers may delay trips until they have to come, which creates bunching instead of smooth flow.
So the miller is not running one steady business all year. He is running several versions of the same business. The harvest rush, the quiet month, the low water month, the repair month, the muddy road month, the month when everyone expects service because everyone remembers paying the toll last time. This is why a mill that looks profitable on an average day can become fragile in real time. Average water is not what turns the wheel. Actual water turns the wheel. Average demand is not what fills the yard. Actual carts fill the yard, usually when they all want the same thing at once. If harvest is poor, fewer sacks come. If drought lowers the stream, the wheel works less. If flood damages the works, repair costs rise. If customers win the right to go elsewhere because the mill is slow or poorly maintained, the toll base weakens. If a competing mill appears nearby, the monopoly may become a lawsuit instead of an income stream. The miller carries the operating risk, while the owner of the right often carries less of the daily pain. That is why the real winner may not be the person standing in the flour dust. The real winner may be the lord who owns the mill rights, leases them out, and collects steady income from the village's need to eat. But even the lord has to be careful. If he squeezes too hard, tenants resist. If he neglects the mill, custom weakens. If he allows the miller to cheat openly, the village's anger becomes a problem for the manor. If he underinvests in repairs, the whole income stream can decay. Control is valuable only when the controlled system still works. Now compare two mill owners. The first owner thinks like the fantasy. He sees the mill as a toll box powered by nature. He charges what custom allows. He delays repairs because the wheel is still turning. He ignores complaints because the tenants must come anyway.
He skimps on the channel, patches the gear badly, and lets the stones go too long without proper dressing. For a while, the money looks fine. Then the queue grows. Meal quality falls. Customers complain. A wet season damages the banks. The wheel stops at the worst moment. People begin looking for excuses to use another mill. The monopoly that seemed permanent suddenly depends on documents, disputes, and repairs that cost more because they were delayed. He did not lose because milling was a bad business. He lost because he treated an infrastructure business like a rent box. The second owner thinks like a systems operator. He maintains the channel before flood season. He keeps the sluices usable. He pays attention to the stones. He manages the queue during harvest. He makes the toll visible and customary, so customers may resent it but cannot easily call it unfair. He keeps access roads and unloading space practical. He understands that water, grain, law, and reputation must all arrive together for the mill to pay. The first owner owns a wheel. The second owner owns reliability. Reliability is what the village actually buys. The customer thinks he is paying to have grain ground. What he wants is the confidence that his household will have meal when it needs it. What the manor wants is a claim on local production. What the miller wants is enough toll to cover rent, repair, labor, and the years when water or harvest turns against him. That is why the medieval watermill is such a clean old ledger business. It sits at the meeting point of necessity and control. Necessity brings customers. Control brings tolls. But repair, weather, resentment, and obligation eat the fantasy. Now ask who really gets paid. The lord gets paid if he owns the mill and leases it out. The landholder gets paid if access to the site depends on his rights. The millwright gets paid because the machine is too important to leave broken. The stone supplier gets paid because millstone's wear and quality matters. The carpenter, blacksmith, and local craftsman get paid when gears, axles, fittings, and buildings fail. The laborers get paid when channels need clearing, banks need repairing, and sacks need moving. The authority gets paid through fines, fees, or the legal weight behind custom. The farmer pays in grain, the baker pays in dependence. The miller gets what remains after the toll has passed through rent, repairs, labor, water trouble, and public suspicion. That final point matters. The miller may look like the villain of the village ledger because he takes a visible share from every sack. But the visible share is not the same as profit. Some of it belongs to the landlord. Some of it belongs to repair. Some of it belongs to the next flood. Some of it belongs to the stone that has not worn out yet, but will.
Some of it belongs to the quiet work of keeping customers angry but still returning. So could owning a medieval watermill work? Yes. It could be one of the strongest local businesses in a medieval economy. If the water was reliable. If the legal right was clear. If the village was large enough. If the roads brought grain instead of excuses. If the stones were maintained. If the toll was accepted as custom. If the miller was trusted just enough. If the owner understood that monopoly does not remove responsibility. But if you entered with only the simple dream, the river turns the wheel and the tolls roll in, the ledger would correct you quickly. The river has seasons. The wheel has parts. The stones wear down. The tenants complain. The landlord still wants rent. The law gives you customers only as long as the mill can serve them. That is the trap. A medieval watermill looked like a machine for taking a small share from everyone else's grain.
But underneath, it was a machine for converting water rights, legal custom, engineering, maintenance, road access, and public trust into income. The customer bought milling. The landlord sold obligation. The miller bought repairs, resentment, and risk. And the profit lived in the narrow gap between the turning wheel and the next thing that stopped it.